I was 19 years old when I started on community radio. The first thing people used to say was, I can't tell if it's a man or a woman. And traditionally, 20 years ago, a guy would have been told that's a disadvantage. And funny enough, that difference, when I got into EWN, my editor-in-chief at the time in my interview said, do you know what I loved when I listened to your demo? I loved that I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman.
This is the Dr. Tlaleng Cooking Show. Thank you very much for being here. Welcome to the Dr. Tlaleng Cooking Show, and today I bring you an episode where we will be delving deeper into understanding what it means to be a Black person who does not necessarily embody all of the societal expectations about what it is to be a Black person or a Black woman for that matter. We will be looking at what it means to challenge these stereotypes, and I can tell you, I am one of those people who are often judged for so-called progressive values. Let's dig in. I'm so honored to be joined by my friend and colleague, the esteemed Thembekile Mrototo, a fellow Free Staterian. I don't get about it. You're not Twenu, but I'm so excited, guys, because Thembekile is really rising star in terms of broadcast and news arena. Very excited, but as usual, before we get into the meat of things, let's just enjoy some nibbles, relax a little bit, and of course, right?
You say nibbles, I could eat all three of these donuts.
Baby, let's. It's literally for us to
I'll inhale them.
Let's do it. And of course, I mean, one thing about, these kinds of conversations is that you are always the one asking questions, right? And I get the honor of being the one to ask questions today.
And this feels very uncomfortable, not because of the person asking questions, but because when you're used to interviewing, I suppose it's also a control thing. I'll work that out in therapy. But being on this side requires me to let go.
I love it. My absolute love for you is beyond the fact that it's a Free State and all of that, but it did come from falling in love with this voice, and we got to still experience you on television, right? And so your journey for me is also quite fascinating in how you went from small radio station and immediately into the big powerhouses of Johannesburg. What has been the cost of negotiating your worth?
I mean, this is my 10th year in commercial radio. So when I joined Prime Media via 702, Eyewitness News, 702, and then ultimately 947 that I'm doing now, and then going into TV news, which was from about 2016. I think the cost of negotiating your worth, often because I'm very opinionated, is understanding that means you're not always going to be the favorite. Do you know what I mean? You have to accept that certain things will not be offered to you because you don't always toe the line.
Wow, it's about too much.
And it's always been a thing. And you also have to just accept that things are as they are. And you need to also, with age, I've learned figuring out when to speak and which things to let go. So picking your battles. But ultimately, the cost, and I mean, I've been fortunate in that my career has gone well, right? But it's understanding that sometimes being as frank and as opinionated as I am can work against me, even though there hasn't been a major moment where I can say that has been to my detriment at this point.
So when do you locate then that Thembekile Mrototo voice, right, and intention of who you are within all of those layers of channel, their mandate and authority?
Doing it my way. I was very lucky that when I started out, the way in which I presented firstly was appreciated for what it was, right? The way in which I approached interviews very quickly was appreciated. I mean, not everyone loves it, but people instantly enjoyed it. So I understood that the way that I was doing things was working, but also I know that if I were to try to do it as you do it, Dr. T, or as another colleague would do it, it just wouldn't be the same, right? So it's about being fair, firstly, trying to be fair, we don't always get it right, but also speaking in my voice and then applying what I know, my lived experience, to whatever conversation it is, because ultimately that colors our understanding and our reading of any situation in life.
We see you literally, right? In how you navigate your daily work and balancing all of your roles. We'll hear you on radio, breaking news, then we see on television. Within the next hour, you're doing something else. For you, how is that process like, right, of finding and organizing your life, in the different roles that you have in society? And how do you find contentment, right, in those very decisions that you make?
I think I find a lot of contentment in the work because I love the work. I love the business of broadcasting. So in being on air, I could come in for a TV shift at 6 p.m., having been up at 4 a.m. for radio. And once that red light comes on, you come alive. Also, you have to be a bit of a performer to be a broadcaster.
And
so
then
you're like, oh, it's an audience. You're like, what do you guys want me to give you? Shall I give you this? Shall I give you that? And my life is not really organized, right? It really, the basis of it is the fact that I love what I do. I've always loved news from childhood because I didn't even like to play outside with other kids. I always joke and say that TV raised me. I still can't believe 10 years on that someone like me, a boy from Bloemfontein, who came to Johannesburg, stereotypical story, with a backpack and a suitcase, is able to live my dream. I don't think I organize things, but I'm a structured person in a way, and work gives me structure. So knowing that, okay, from 4 a.m. I get up, 5 to 10 a.m. that's radio, maybe another thing in between, maybe television in the evening. That's the structure that I'm used to, but I'm also grateful in a sense that I've got an amazing helper. My friends are great. A lot of them are in the industry, so that helps. But I also rely a lot on friends who aren't in the business for those moments where you actually have to step away. Because sometimes you get so caught up in the work that you forget that to be able to thrive at being a professional, you need the personal to be healthy.
And, you're leading me into something that I don't think you perhaps even project that to us. I think maybe we project that onto people that we see on television, right, who may, in fact, affirm that even though we are different, we can still make it. And I think a lot of people see that in you, right, and judge that as being progressive or being untraditional or pushing the boundary. Whereas when at Thembekile every day, you just love your work, you love broadcasting and just to carry on with things. So how do you then respond or reflect, right, on some of that responsibility that's been given onto you as someone that we hear and that we see, who is not necessarily choosing to be seen in that way as a role model even, or someone who's inspirational, but by default of where we all come from?
I love that. It comes back to the conversation we've had a lot in this country, especially in the last 10 to 15 years, representation. For example, when I started out in radio, I remember I was 19 years old when I started on community radio. The first thing people used to say was, I can't tell if it's a man or a woman. And traditionally, 20 years ago, a guy would have been told that's a disadvantage. And funny enough, that difference, when I got into EWN, my editor-in-chief at the time in my interview said, do you know what I loved when I listened to your demo? I loved that I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. And it seems like a small thing until a guy with a small voice, a queer person, for example, who may say, I present in a certain way and therefore I've come to believe that would work against me. And then by just going on air, it makes such a difference that you can do it. You don't necessarily have to speak in a baritone voice. You don't have to be overly macho and masculine, but there's space for you in the industry and you can thrive in the midst of what is considered the norm. I mean, even being from Bloemfontein, people from where I come from don't generally end up on television. It doesn't happen. And I remember the nervousness among people who knew me when I packed up at 21 and I said, I'm going to Johannesburg and this is what I'm going to do. It doesn't happen. And for it to have happened says to a kid who may be in Tsoseletso or a high school in Bloemfontein that you can come from here and actually get to Johannesburg, be on a commercial radio station, be on a successful television news station, and do other shows.
Be all of you.
Yes, as you are. Be you, because you bring yourself. I always say the difference with what I do is I'm not a doctor. I'm not an accountant. So I'm not presenting sums or a diagnosis. It's me. I sound different. I look different. Has worked to my advantage. And I know that there are people who look and sound like me who want to do this, who for them, it may be a 5-minute bulletin on the radio, but it makes a huge difference as to how they see their potential, their prospects.
Who was your influence growing up? And who do you look up to now as an esteemed public person?
Personally, my parents. You were asking me earlier about structure and how packed my schedule is. I come from a home where both my parents are very hard workers. My mother, after my father died, my dad passed when I was 13, worked 6 days a week. And she'd still get home and make extra money doing alterations, fixing people's clothes. She was a domestic worker, ended up as a cleaner in a clothing factory. The other ladies there taught her how to sew. And that's what she did. And she worked because she had to raise 3 boys, right? Her husband was no longer there. And so I would personally, my parents, because my dad was also a hard worker, did incredibly well, insisted on education. Professionally, my career has been influenced by a lot of people, and I've been fortunate to meet my heroes. And all my heroes were great, right? People like Ridi Tlhabi. Nokolo Grootboom was my first experience of a TV news anchor. And she was this marvelous figure. And then there were like the Nigiwe Bigichas of the world, Sikim Kabateli, Latombele, Kolani Gwala, and those, Joanne Joseph actually, and those were my childhood heroes. And now I'm lucky enough to be able to move in spaces where those are people I can still reach out to. But also, even internationally, there are people who I look up to a great deal. I mean, Aman Poor, the obvious option, right? Al Jazeera, everyone who knows me knows I'm a huge Al Jazeera fan.
Al Jazeera, no cartoons.
And my favorite person at Al Jazeera, there's a lady by the name of Foli Batibo. She's a senior presenter at Al Jazeera English. And I find I'm drawn to people who are unique. When I look at the people I like, there's always something different, something slightly odd, but that is part of their brilliance.
And that's what's beautiful, that there is space for all of us, right? What would you say to your younger self about love?
Ooh, we are in the sewer, my dear. Go bad. The trick is to just keep surviving and trying. But I think on a more serious level, what I would say to my younger self about love is it does exist. It's easy when you come from where we come from, where much of your life is engineered around survival, right? Because the circumstances aren't great, that you close yourself off to certain things. And yes, love comes from your family, your mother, your father, your siblings, maybe your friends. But even romantic love will locate you. And if you're lucky enough, it'll locate you multiple times.
Yeah, we believe in multiples.
What does Bonang say? Hako fela, rata umong.
Ayana, mamelang. Part of why I love you and your story so much is that any child from anywhere in the South Africa, when you are supported, you can do more than just survive and thrive.
My father was not an educated man by any measure, but he took great pride in having a bright kid. And he used to say, you take after your dad. And my father, with a lack of formal education, I remember, you know those little chairs you buy your kids? I used to have a little red one. And I used to sit in front of the TV and imitate the newsreaders. And even though I couldn't put it in words, I couldn't put it into words as a 5-6-year-old, that man genuinely believed that this child in a 2-roomed house in Bloemfontein was going to do something great. And when I think about that, it's bittersweet, right? Because he's the one person I wish was here to see it. My mother and I always joke that no one would have loved having a child who's on radio and television more than my father, because he never doubted. Even with the lack of material things, he never doubted that I was going to do something with my life. And then you look at my mom, guys, a girl from Edinburgh in the Free State.
But you're not Free State though.
Right. And I always say, my mother is My friends always joke she's the most connected person. If you need a place to stay, my mother will help you find a room. You need a loan shark, she knows a good one with a good rate. You need clothes, she knows where to go. But my mother, I remember when I got to matric and I wanted to study journalism, had no idea what that would entail. Gave me the money for the registration. When I was financially excluded. I've told the story from the University of the Free State because if you can't pay, you can't study, right? Unfortunately, in South Africa.
We're still there?
Yeah, we're still fighting that battle. She still believed, even when I said 2 years later, I think I'm going to Joburg to pursue a thing. That lady again raised money. Didn't understand what it was. When I said I work at 702, had never heard it as a girl from the Free State, but she believed. She sent taxi money religiously, took from herself to make it work because she believed in this. And she's so proud, even in the smallest. I mean, when I think I did a 30-second scene for a telenovela. In that lady's life, I had won the SAFTA that year.
I mean, you are her baby.
Yeah.
Right?
And she genuinely believes I'm the best thing since sliced bread.
She ain't lying.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
She ain't lying.
I mean, my mother still teases me about something I apparently did. I might have been 5 or 6. We'd gone to church. My dad was a pastor. And one of these men, there's always a strict member of the clergy. And I don't know what I was saying to my dad as a loudmouth kid. And he said, Osele. That's what this pastor said. And I said, Loy now Osele. Which was regarded as controversial, right? Because there's this kid, 5 or 6, saying to a pastor, but he started it. And to this day, I still say, touch is a move. If you started, I'm going to serve it right back.
None, but you're going to end it.
I'm going to finish it. And so you had that, and the way in which they then raised me and accepting that I was the different kid who didn't want to go play outside. And when I did play outside, I didn't play with the boys. I didn't want to get scratches. I didn't want to climb a tree. I was like, you see, the girls are nice. I like, see, they play a house, skipping. You're like, what a civilized set of sport or recreational activities. And there was never no, go play with the boys or go outside. And they just understood that and took it for what it was. And I'm grateful for that because I think if I had not had that foundation, I would doubt a lot of what it is that makes me different now. I was telling you earlier about starting out and people saying, oh, I thought it was a woman. We had a caller on the radio a few years ago, a man who said, I always thought it was a woman. I said, for the right price, baby, I could be.
Speak on it.
Yes. And do you know what I find in embracing difference is that often people also just open up to it and people appreciate it. And I'm glad that I'm in a space where it has been and accepted feels like a bad word, right? Because no one should be fighting for acceptance in the world. We all should be allowed to just be. But again, just seeing that change, I think, has been heartwarming, and knowing that my parents planted the foundation for my comfort in my own skin, even though I am still considerably, not socially awkward, but I'm actually quite introverted, which is what people don't realize, that I do the work and I go back to my cocoon and I go home.
So, an interesting question especially because you're a broadcaster, what are your burning questions that you are still yet to ask?
There isn't an original question under the sun about an issue. It's all in the approach. Because we can ask the same thing in multiple ways. But I think what's lacking is nuanced conversation in South Africa about a lot of things, be it things linked to our horrific history with apartheid, the letdowns, the disappointments of the last 30 years, our hopes and dreams. And I think I'm hoping through my work to get us to a place where we can have nuanced conversations, and especially conversations where we can admit that more than one thing can be true.
And I think that is what's brilliant about this, Thembekile. You were a child who was poured into, who experienced that love, unconditional love. And here you are as an adult who's creating a community, whether you're intending to be an activist or not, but that is how your life, right, is panning. And thank goodness for that. And congratulations on your journey of 10 years in the field. And I think that's something really worthy of raising our glasses to.
When I get to 20 years, is the question.
We're doing it now.
Okay, if I don't find a blesser, I'll have to put in another shift.
No, honey, we're working girls. Forget about that.
Is there anyone at the UN? I'm available.
Okay, I'll pull some feelers out.
But I'm a goodwill ambassador. For love.
For love, yes. So in the spirit of love and community, so we're going to raise our glass and toast to something that you want to dedicate this episode and this moment to. And, before we close off and stop blushing.
Before we toast, Mom, this is alcohol free. A toast to dreams fulfilled and blessings ahead.
I can toast to that, my friend. Cheers to you.
Am I even holding it properly?
Thank you so much for joining us, Miss
Thank you for having me.
And I hope all of you enjoyed this inspiring conversation about resilience, about the absolute joy, but also unconditional love that families can pour into us from early on, despite what any stereotypes, despite what any judgment may come from the outside. It is important as we continue on this journey with you to feel that it really does take a village, but more importantly, that there are many ways of being African, of being ourselves, and that through this episode, you are inspired to find the power within you to be yourself and be just the way you are. If you've enjoyed this conversation, please like, please subscribe, and share widely within our community as we try to reach as many people as we can. This is the Dr. Tlaleng Mofokeng Show. Ke a leboha, ke a le rata. Till next time. Oh! E wela ha monate.